Yo, what's up? All right, in this video, I'm going to talk about my very first fast, and I'm also going to give an update on my recovery from my injuries. So let's start with the recovery, since that one will be really short. So 2 weeks ago, I was riding my mountain bike, and I ate it hard. The right side of my body took the impact from the crash, and I couldn't walk for a week. I was limping. I didn't leave my house. Luckily, I meal prep. I'm not like a meal prepper. I like to cook batches of maybe 10 servings of recipes at a time. And so for like the last 3 months, I've just always had at least 10 servings of some kind of food that I cooked in the fridge and the freezer ready to go. Usually closer to 15 because I'll be cycling through like 2 different batches of recipes at the same time. And so like when I run out of one, I have half left of the other, and then it's time to make another, and so I've always got something to eat. And I just do that because it's convenient. It's just really convenient to have days where I don't need to really cook anything and I just reheat stuff. And then because I calorie count, I'm able to make those meals exactly the way that I need them to meet my nutrient goals. So it's just like a really convenient way to do calorie counting so that calorie counting doesn't consume all my time, and just have a lot of convenience. So it just so happened that when I crashed and got really messed up, that I just so happened to have a bunch of prepared meals ready to go. So like even though I couldn't really walk for a week, and I basically didn't leave my apartment for a week, it wasn't really much of a problem. Weird thing that happened was that so I had been exercising a lot every day. I had been either like walking 12 miles or walking 6 miles and running 4 miles, or like running 4 miles and biking 6, sometimes 17 miles. Or if it was the weekend, I might just do a really crazy bike ride and do like a 20-mile mountain bike ride. So I was getting a lot of activity every day. When I got temporarily crippled and like house ridden, I lost 4 pounds in like 5 days. It freaked me out. So I went on the internet and I got some opinions from random people. And a lot of people think it was just water weight. They said that when your body's stressed out, that it will hold on to more water than it needs. And I was stressing my body out because every day I was exercising like twice a day. And it was, well, I already described it. It was somewhat vigorous. So I think what happened was that my body it had some time to recuperate. I really hadn't taken a rest day in months because I felt like I didn't need it. But I guess maybe I did need it because my body, if what the people surmised is true, then my body essentially did need a rest day and or week, and it took that time to really let the extra weight go. So that was cool. And as far as like injuries, I can walk now. I just got back home from a 5-mile hike. I was hoping it would be longer than that, but yeah, it was only 5 miles. So just did that with a friend, and there was no sweat. And I got 25,000 steps yesterday and like the day before. So walked 12 miles, 6-mile walk, and then 6-mile walk. When I do the 6-mile walk, sometimes the inside of my hip will start to hurt a little bit and I just have to slow down. But yeah, like I'm basically back at it. My bike's in the repair shop. When I crashed it, I frayed the derailleur. So the brake cable needs to be tightened because the handlebars tilted and tightened the brake cable. So the brake cable needs to be tightened up from the crash. The derailleur needs a little bit of attention. And the front wheel got bent out of shape a little bit from the crash. I crashed so hard that I misaligned the front fork and wheel. So it was a hard crash. The funny thing though is there was a guy in the shop who was wearing 3 casts, both of his legs and one of his arms. He was on crutches. He overheard me talking about how I crashed. He said, "Oh, what do you know? I also crashed on the same day, but I was going faster." So if I was going faster, I very well could have broken bones. So yeah, it was a bad crash. So that's my hip injury. The scrapes are all gone. Don't need to wear a sling for comfort anymore. My shoulder is still messed up. But yesterday I did 10 pull-ups and 10 chin-ups, and the day before I did a little bit. I just have to be really careful when I lift my arm up. So what I do is when I lift my arm up, if I feel any pain, I just let it back down, do a little bit of stretching, try it again, and that's been working for me. So I can do my exercises now. So I'm really happy. So that's my recovery. Still a little messed up, but I'm basically able to achieve my exercise and fitness goals now. So I'm super happy about that. Okay, now what I want to talk about is something really exciting. Fasting. Okay, or time restricted eating that the internet calls it, or intermittent fasting, or the real keto, as I might describe it. So essentially, it's just starving yourself. But anyone on the forums that talk about fasting, because there's a million websites and forums and YouTubers and that talk about it. It's not like no one talks about it. There's plenty of people that are interested in the subject. They absolutely hate it when you refer to it as starving. And it really isn't the same thing, because when people think of starving, they think of, Nazi camps full of emaciated 90, 70-pound skeletal on the verge of death people. That's starvation. It's not healthy. So obviously, what I tried recently and what I'm getting into and what the people on the forums talk about when they talk about fasting, it's not the same thing that causes people to turn out like that one actor from The Machinist, where he looked like a skeleton of a man and he was lanky and he had no muscle. No, fasting is controlled. So something that I realized even before I tried this fasting thing out recently was that the calorie counting that I'm doing, the way that I'm watching the way that I eat, the way that I'm meticulously tracking what comes in and goes out, my exercise, I realized that a lot of the stuff that I, and less specifically, like pretty much anyone who does this CICO stuff, CICO stands for calorie counting, calories in, calories out, CICO, acronym, CICO. Okay, so I realized that a lot of the things that the CICO people, I'm including myself in that group, CICO people, a lot of the things that the CICO people do, they're actually similar to a lot of things that people with eating disorders do. I dated a girl once who had some eating disorders, some pretty bad ones, and I've known some people with eating disorders, and it's kind of scary because I was thinking about it, and there's a lot of things that people with eating disorders do that people that are health conscious, dieting and exercising, people like me, do that are the same. For example, if you go into a forum thread where people are talking about ways to avoid hunger, you may very well be in the midst of people that have straight up mental issues and have eating disorders. Sure, there will also be people there like myself where everything's in control, but that leads me to what I realized, which is that it's a fine line, maybe not too fine, but it's a little ambiguous. There's a line between having a disorder or like a mental problem and doing things healthily. And I don't really know what makes the line, but after thinking about it for a little bit, because I haven't thought about it too hard, but after thinking about it for a little bit, I've decided for now that the line between an unhealthy, dangerous, harmful eating disorder and, potentially harmful, and being health conscious, tracking what you're eating, tracking how you're exercising, the things that I'm doing, I've decided that the line is control of the situation. And here's my reasoning. So people that have EDs, ED is an acronym for eating disorder, so ED, eating disorders. Okay, so people who have EDs, they're not in control. Their malfunction or problem or ED is in control. They are letting the ED dictate how they live their life and control their eating and actions and such. Someone like myself, I came in with a perfectly normal lifestyle. I mean, I was overweight, so I was eating a lot. Um, but I had no issues. And I've never had a history of mental issues, at least diagnosed. um, and I have very specific goals. I think that's another difference. Earlier when I said that earlier when I was describing the ambiguous line between an ED and being health conscious as doing it in a controlled way. Well, part of the control is having a goal or goals. I have multiple goals. Um, well, my goals are get a six pack, and I want to be able to run 6 miles every day. The reason for the 6 mile goal is that every year I do this race called the Wharf to Wharf race in Santa Cruz, where 15,000 people put on race bibs and run 6 miles from one wharf to another wharf along the Santa Cruz coast. It's beautiful. There's fog. Everyone's happy. And every few hundred feet, there's like a little garage band playing music. It's so fun. I love it. I love it. It's a blast. It's such a blast. And that's a 6.1 mile race. And every time I used to do that, my knees would be screwed up. Everything would just be screwed up for days, sometimes weeks. So I could do it, but it was because I was younger. I was in my 20s. Now I'm like in my very early 30s, and I'm at that point. I'm at the point in my life where health is something that if you don't go for it and make it a priority, you can't just coast on your youthful vigor anymore. So that's another reason that I've decided to become health conscious, is because I started to notice a decline in various qualities of life because I wasn't on top of my health. And now that I've been on top of my health for a few months, it's a night and day difference. It's so amazing. I'm not going to get into it, but I have been like slowly trying to encourage important people in my life to adopt various things that I'm doing, because it's had such a profound and rewarding impact on my quality of life that, to me, I think, yes, to me, I think, why wouldn't everyone want to enjoy these kinds of improvements? But getting back on topic, so I want to be able to do that race that I did once a year with pain. I want to be able to do that every day without issue. I would be so proud of myself if I could say that one race that was the longest race that I ever did, and I only did it once a year and it killed me, I can now do every day with no pain and no stress. If I could say that about myself, I would be so proud of myself. And I'm not there, but I think I'm like at least a third way there, because I'm recovering from my injuries. But right before I got injured, I was running like 4.2 or 4.3 miles Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I had started thinking about either ramping up the mileage or adding a fourth run. Like eventually, I want to be able to run every day. And I've been going on forums where runners talk about running, and I've been reading articles about running, and I've been watching videos by runners for runners. And there is a plan that anyone can do. I mean, there's a million plans that anyone can do, where you gradually get there. You gradually get to a point where you're running every day. And from what I've discovered, running 6 miles every day is totally achievable. Totally achievable. Committed, dedicated runners will go over 100 miles every week. I'm talking about running 42 miles a week, because 7 days a week, 6 miles a day, 7 times 6, 42 miles. 42 miles a day? Totally achievable. So I know I can do it, and I know I will get there. I'm super stoked thinking about the progress I've made and the things that I will do and that I'm capable of. It's so fun. So that's one of my goals, is be able to run 6 miles every day. And the other goal is get a six-pack. Well, if you ask anyone who doesn't know about health and fitness and diet, how do you get a six-pack? They might have some idea. Well, let me tell you what, their idea probably won't work. But after doing all the research that I've done, I know my plan is working and will work. I don't have a six-pack yet, but I'm the lightest I've been in over 10 years. I'm fitting into clothing I haven't worn in 5 or 7 years. I'm more confident about my looks than I've ever been. I can do more body weight exercises than I've ever been able to do. Obviously, I was talking about running. My physical fitness in terms of what I can do outside on my feet and on my bicycle has gone through the roof. I know from the results of my physical activity and the way that I feel about my body that what I'm doing is working. And as far as the weight loss is concerned, I actually started to get a little anxious, and I felt like I wasn't making any progress. Because even though I've lost like 23 pounds now in 3 months, so way to go me, I was going on these fitness forums where there are people that weigh 400 plus pounds. So I'm in the same forums and threads and communities as these people who weigh 400, sometimes more, pounds. And so when they talk about weight loss, first of all, they often are willing to do much more drastic things than I ever have done. And they also, coming into their weight loss journey, they had much more unhealthy habits than I ever did. And so when they start cutting out the sugar and the soda and the junk food, which I haven't eaten sugar and soda and junk food for like 7 or 8 years. I've been eating kind of healthy for over half a decade. So I just got overweight from just not exercising and eating more than I should, not unhealthy food. So when these 400 plus pound people cut out soda and junk food and what have you, they see insane progress at the start. And they'll come into these threads and say things like, I lost 30 pounds in a month, or 2 months probably. I lost 100 pounds since January. Things like that. So at first when I saw things like that, I got a little demotivated because I thought, wow, I've only lost 15 pounds in 2 months or 20 pounds in 3 months. Like, I'm really screwing up at this compared to these other people. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. You're not them. You were only ever, let me think for a second. I think my goal weight right now is 145, 135. I mean, I don't know when the six-pack's going to happen, but I'm predicting the six-pack's going to happen when I lose another 10 to 15 pounds. So let's say 140. So I'm at 152 right now. Then that will mean that I have lost 36 pounds. Not yet. Today it's only 23. But so when this is all said and done, and I have that six-pack that I'm want to get, that everyone wants to get, I'll only be able to say that I lost 36 pounds. So compared to these people that weigh 400 plus pounds and they need to lose 200 plus pounds, compared to them, it feels like my progress and my goals are minuscule. But like I said a minute ago, you have to realize that you're you and you're not other people. Your situation is different. And like I said before, I was coming into this in a much, much, much healthier way than most people in these communities did. Now, what that means is that it's the age-old adage, you have to weigh what other people say with a grain of salt. But it also means that some of the things that they do aren't right for you. Now, I knew that right off the bat. Not the age-old adage about taking what they say with a grain of salt. Because at first I was, like I said, I was demotivated, being surrounded by all these people who were making much better progress than I was. But the thing that I realized later was that they're going to be doing things that I don't need to do. So I'm a very careful person. I don't gamble. I don't like to take risks. I have investments in the stock market, but I do it through a manager that I hired, and I pay the manager to essentially uh, control the risk. So I'm not confident in investing. I'm not confident enough to invest my own money in the stock market, but I am confident enough to hire a pro for a meager price and let them make extremely informed decisions. And so far, it's been the right move so far. During the COVID crash, my portfolio actually went up, um, whereas I don't think that would have been the case if I'd done it myself, because my investment group is using quantitative analysis. It's a really cool algorithm that I never would have thought of or used myself. Anyway, off the topic of finance. So because I'm so cautious and because I'm so fearful of like any kind of self-harm, because I've seen people with eating disorders, I basically was just, and still am, very trepidatious, taking things very slowly. And any of my friends who know me, they know that I, and my family as well, they know that I like to obsess over things. And so, for example, when I find a topic that interests me, I'll do a lot of research. And I actually pride myself sometimes. I like to be able to say that when I find something that I'm interested in, I become an expert in it. Maybe expert's a stretch, but compared to a layman, yeah, expert. Like, for example, all the stuff that I'm talking about right now, calorie counting, and soon I'll be talking about fasting as well, and exercise, weight loss, and such. Like, I consider myself to be, like, compared to the average person, maybe not an expert, but very knowledgeable. Knowledgeable enough to, I've given advice to, like, multiple people now, and I don't tell them that my word is law. Like, I tell them, hey, this is just what I found from forums. Like, they know I'm not a doctor, etc. But like, I'm a resource now to people. Like, people look at me as a resource. I mean, they did before. I used to be a teacher. It's not like it's the first time that I've been a resource for people. But it's a rewarding feeling to learn so much about a subject that you can say that you've mastered it to a degree, not completely, but to enough that other people know so much less that when they want to know about it, they think the best use of my time would be to ask them about it. So that's where I'm at. So anyway, because I was so fearful, blah, 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 for the last 3 months, I've only been doing carefully controlled calorie counting with exercise, with reasonable deficits to absolutely mitigate the chances of any kind of risk. Now, here's the thing about risk. There's calculated risk. And a lot of people become very successful by taking calculated risks. So a calculated risk it's just a risk where you know a lot about what you're risking. Like, if I gamble and when I'm playing poker or like whatever, I don't gamble, but just rock, paper, scissors. Say you're playing rock, paper, scissors. What's the calculated risk there? Basically none. There's no calculated risk. You know there's going to be like a 1 in 3 or 1 in 2. I guess it's 1 in 2, right? Because if you're playing rock, paper, scissors, you're playing against one person. So what's the chance that either one's going to win? Probably 50-50. So yeah, it's a calculated risk, but it's not like you could do any kind of thinking or theorizing or calculation to improve your chances. Like, you know that it's probably a 50-50 risk, right? So you wouldn't take a 50-50 risk with your life. And I'm dealing with calorie counting and weight loss and exercise. If I do things wrong, and I would have to do them very, very wrong. But if I did things really, really, really wrong, I could cause permanent organ damage. Like, I know a person who has permanent heart damage from starving themselves for a very long time when they were young. You can cause all sorts of permanent damage to yourself when you get into the territory of controlling what you eat and exercise, right? Like, it's playing with fire. You don't play with fire without having a safety plan and safety gear. Or you do play with fire without a safety plan and safety gear, and you potentially burn yourself, possibly alive. Or maybe you just get some scars if you're lucky. This is why I was talking about fearfulness and trepidation and such earlier when I was talking about how I was basically, I dipped my toes in. Okay, so now after doing this for 3 months, I've gotten to a point where I know enough about these subjects that I'm able to theorize how things would go if I did certain things differently. I'm able to calculate risks. So what I've done for the last um, few days, and I know that I literally just said days, so doing days worth of research for, I don't know, maybe investing all of your savings would probably be stupid. But it's calculated risk. So if the risk is low, then days worth of research is fine. And so I've done days worth of research on fasting, the stuff I was talking about at the start of the video, which is, starving yourself, essentially. And like I said before, everyone in the fasting communities absolutely hates it when anyone uses the word starve at all, because like I said before, it's not really starving yourself because you're doing it in a controlled manner. And I'm going to get to that controlled manner in a minute, because yes, there actually is a method to the madness. But yeah, so I did a few days of research, and when I say, and so when people say that they researched for a few days, it's not probably the same thing as when I say that I researched something for a few days, because sometimes I have a little bit of an obsessive personality. I'll fixate on something and I'll really, really get into it. It's a blessing and a curse. If I could have been born without it, I probably would be born without it. But we're the way that we are, and it's taken me 10 plus years to realize this about myself. But I'm at the point in my life now where I say, hey, this is something that I'm going to live with. I can't get rid of it. So how do you make lemonade out of lemons, right? Let's turn lemons into lemonade. And I first had this thought a year or two ago. I had finally realized, hey, I have a little bit of a personality quirk. How can I harness this to make the rest of my life more enjoyable, like better? How can I use it to my advantage instead of letting it ruin me? Because I have lost myself to video games before, and it's not good. So my solution to that is take that energy that I get sometimes when I get really interested in a subject, try to forcefully channel that energy into things that will make me a more whole and interesting and accomplished and knowledgeable and better person. Something that I can be proud of myself for doing. And so for the last 3 or 4, or however long it's been since because I started tracking the calories 3 months ago, but I was starting to get into like a healthy way of thinking 4 or 5 months ago at least. I probably made the conscious decision to say like, hey, I know I'm an obsessive. I know I need a hobby. Let's get into health. Because I've always been putting off health for the last 10 years. Ever since I got out of college, it's like, I've never had a six-pack before. It would be really cool to get a six-pack. And I've always been self-conscious about the way I look. I mean, most people are. So, yeah. So like I said, when most people say that they spent a few days researching something, it's not the same thing as when I say that I spent a few days researching something. No, I basically just obsessed over this stuff from morning to night. I've been reading forums, not just one forum, like 5 or 6, easy. I've been poring over articles on various websites dedicated to the subject. I've listened to 2 podcasts, which were each several hours long, which had like old doctors talking about this subject. They've got tons of experience, and these are medical doctors who used stuff that I'm doing or like going to do to fix problems with patients they had that weren't really fixable. I've watched tons of YouTube videos, which I'm a firm believer in teaching yourself how to do stuff with YouTube. I taught myself how to unicycle with YouTube. Okay, you can learn anything on YouTube. And I've become a member of, they're not a support group. It's a forum on it's a forum where it's ephemeral. There's a new thread every day. Threads live and die. Everyone's anonymous. And so I've become a community member in there. What does community member mean? Nothing. There's no usernames. There's no sign up. It's all anonymous. You don't need an account. All it means is that I've started frequenting the threads and reading what other people have to say. I don't know anyone's name. No one knows anyone's name. But it's essentially like a support group. And I had been participating in another support group. It's the same thing. It's not literally a support group, but it's basically like a support group. I had been participating in another support group on the same forum for just general weight loss and calorie counting. And so they're really helpful to vent steam and tell anecdotes and ask questions and things like that. So that's what I mean when I say that I've been researching this stuff for several days. And so what I did this last day is I did my first fast. That's right. So on Friday night, it was, work, Monday through Friday, I work full time. Normal day, I ate dinner. It's great. I calorie counted. I think I got like 500 below my TDEE, which, if you're not aware, if you eat 500 less calories than you consume every day, then in 1 week you'll have not eaten 3,500 calories that you normally would have, and so you theoretically lose a pound of fat. So if you want to lose a pound of fat per week, then you eat 500 calories below your total daily energy expenditure. TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. So if you eat 500 calories below your TDEE every day, then you should expect to lose a pound of fat per week. Now that never really works out for most people because they either underestimate the amount of food they're eating and they didn't really have a 500 calorie deficit every day, or they overestimate the amount of exercise they're doing, and so they could, for example, actually eat up to their TDEE and then exercise and say, wow, I burned 500 calories from exercising, therefore I have a 500 calorie deficit, when in reality they didn't really burn 500 calories from exercising. Their calculations were incorrect, or if they were using a wearable, the wearable was incorrect. But theoretically, if you really do have a 500 calorie deficit per day, then you will lose a pound of fat per week. Most people's metabolisms and such equates to 3,500 calories for a pound of fat. Okay. I can't remember why I'm talking about TDEE, but fasting is a really cool tool that may be used by anyone. But this is where like the whole danger and fear and trepidation and line between an ED and safety thing comes into play. If you don't know anything about fasting, then, like me, for example, a week ago, I actually went into some thread where people were talking about fasting, and I told them they were all crazy and what they were doing was dangerous, and they told me to fuck off, and, well, that's how that went. But after I did a bunch of research, I realized that there's a lot more to this than we think. And so essentially, we live in a society. If you're not in a third world country, you're surrounded by food. You have food everywhere all the time. Good, tasty, delicious food. McDonald's. Like, I live a mile from a place that makes my favorite mint chocolate milkshake and my favorite almond butter croissant. Oh my God, they're so delicious. They're so good. We're constantly surrounded by temptation. Not only do we have fast food and treats at so easily accessible, but you go to the store and you can buy numerous types of candies and treats. Even if you don't partake in any of that, you can make food and eat a lot of food that's home cooking that's delicious. You've got takeout, DoorDash. My company is always expensing delivery because we're programmers. So sometimes we'll be up really late because it's a startup company, and the company will say, hey, we'll expense the food for people that are still working, it's not like they make us do it. It's just it's they see the people are working late, and so they say, let's do it. Let's do this for the employees. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that I, and by extension, we, as anyone who lives in a first world country, we're surrounded by easily accessible food and treats all the time. I even have a box of chocolates that somebody sent me sitting in my pantry that I really want to have one. And I have a box of treats that my work sent me. Every quarter they send a box of treats just because they can. Like we are just surrounded by food all the time. And so I thought about it, and I thought, okay, what's the longest you've ever gone without eating? And well, I don't know the answer, but it's probably 8 hours. I probably haven't gone longer than 8 hours without eating in probably my whole life. And that's really a profound thing to realize, that, hey, in my or your whole life, how long have you ever gone without eating? Probably not even 12 hours. Or if you do have an experience like that, you probably only have a handful of those experiences. And so I was listening to this guy, this doctor he's a doctor, so he's incredibly accomplished. He was talking about cancer, because one of the things that he does as a doctor is he treats cancer. And he was talking about chemotherapy. Essentially, what chemotherapy does is it puts your whole body into a state of stress. And the idea is that chemotherapy, in conjunction with other things, will put your body into so much stress that the cancer cells die. You essentially stress the cancer cells to death. So he said that fasting will put your body into a form of stress. And he actually he told the podcaster that he was interviewed by that he did not want to refer to the state that your body goes into when you fast as a stressful state. He actually spent a lot of time to explain this subtlety. The reason why he didn't want to describe it as stress, so starvation or fasting as stress, is because historically speaking, fasting is actually the norm. And being surrounded by all this conveniently accessible food and candy and treats, never needing to go more than 8 hours without eating, on the time scale of human history, especially if you account for evolution, but even if you don't account for evolution and you believe that humanity started a few thousand years ago, even if you believe that, the amount of time that humans have existed where they had food accessible to the point where they never had to go more than 8 hours without eating, I just made that 8 hours up arbitrarily, by the way. But it's nothing. It's nothing. We've only had food this accessible since like the 90s. If you go and watch a video from people being interviewed on the street outside the World Trade Center in, America, in like the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s, you know what you notice? Everyone was skinny. There were basically no fat people in America. So you gotta wonder, what's up with that? What changed? Why are there so many overweight people now? Why are people so much heavier now? It's because of the accessibility of food. And a person that I look up to, this old man, he's a Korean War vet. He told me, because I asked him one day, this was years ago, I asked him, how come people used to be so skinny? Like, why is it hard now to be skinny? And he said, oh, in my day, you had to be used to feeling hungry. He didn't explain why, but now I think I know why. Because back then, in like the 50s and 60s, food was not so accessible. You probably ate 3 square meals, and in between, you didn't just snack on stuff because there weren't literally boxes of snacks and chocolates waiting to go. And so until like the 70s and going back a few hundred years, so all of the time that humans have existed, we, collectively humans, have had to go for days, sometimes months, without food. One of the things this doctor talked about was how there is written history from Italy talking about how the whole nation or country or state or whatever the fuck it is would have to go without food for months on end because of a famine or a war or something. And that's written history. Written history only goes back a few thousand years. If you don't, if you subscribe to the evolution theory and believe that people evolved from monkeys and such, then humans have been around for who knows how long, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know, according to evolution, how long people have been around, but longer than written history. That's my point. The people have been around longer than written history. And we have written history of people going for months without food. So this doctor was saying, hey, for the longest time, up until only very recently, people have been starving, like going for days and weeks and sometimes months without food. So why didn't we all just die? Right? Why didn't we all just keel over and die? If you believe in evolution, well, we exist. Therefore, we exist today because we existed yesterday. Therefore, we existed thousands of years ago when we were just hunter-gatherers. When we were just hunter-gatherers, we didn't have food accessible all the time. We probably had to go weeks and sometimes months without food. What about winter, huh? Probably hard to get food in winter, right? If you're a hunter-gatherer and you don't have non-perishable food stored up for the winter, and you're walking around with a spear covered in cave furs, like, how do people live back then? Well, I don't know, but the human body does, because the human body is what exists today. It's what got us this far. The human body is built for dealing with a lack, like no food, for extended periods of time. Okay, so a car is built for driving. It has wheels for rolling on the road. How is the human body, what are the wheels for the human body that let the human body ride out periods of starvation or fasting, essentially? Well, I'll tell you what the wheels are. I'll tell you what our bodies do to keep us going when we don't have food. It's fat. That's what it is. It's fat. Fat is food. It's a body. It's a function of our body. It's a body part, and it has a purpose. The purpose is to be food when we don't have food. So when we don't have a woolly mammoth to eat, or we don't have a Burger King burger to eat, when I don't have chocolates to munch on, my body will say, hey, I need energy. Because, hey, we're not magical machines. Just like a light bulb, if you turn the electricity off, the light bulb goes off. Just like a car, if you use all the gasoline, the car won't run anymore. Our bodies need energy to run, and we get that energy from food. Duh, right? If you don't feed yourself food, the energy has to come from somewhere, because if it doesn't come from anywhere, you die. You're dead. You starve to death. So if you don't feed yourself, but you haven't starved to death, then you're alive, which means you're using energy. Where does the energy come from? It comes from your fat. Well, it doesn't specifically come from your fat. You have glycogen stores in your muscles. Your muscles, that's where carbohydrates go. So you store up about 1,600 calories worth of glycogen in your body. So you'll have the food in your stomach and in your digestive system, and then you'll have the glycogen in your muscles. And so accounting for all of that, you probably have like half a day or a day's worth of food in you all the time, just all the time, like food plus energy. But what happens when you don't eat for a day and all the food that you ate previously has been used up and processed and turned into energy, and your glycogen stores have been depleted? Well, what happens then? Well, you're not dead yet, so your body says, I need energy, so it's got to get it from somewhere. Where does it get it? Gets it from the fat. Your body starts breaking down the fat and turning the fat into energy. That is the function of the fat. People have lived for, there's a famous guy, I don't remember his name, but if you go on the internet and look up longest fast ever, there's this Scottish dude from less than 100 years ago, because there's photos of him, which means it was less than 100 years ago. like photographs, black and white photographs. So he weighed like, I think 350 or 400 pounds, and he, maybe more actually, but he went on like the longest recorded fast, I think, ever.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, that was weird. Anyway, so he went on the longest fast ever, and it was like I think it was like 400 days. So it was like a year and another third of a year. How did he do it? How did that man? Oh, and by the way, he did it under the supervision of hospital staff, and he lost all his weight. He became real skinny. He stayed skinny. He had no health problems. How did he do it? So he didn't eat. He needed energy. He had a ton of fat. His body burned the fat to live. So that's where the energy came from. But your body needs more than just fat. If you know anything about survival, you know that the body can go for weeks, maybe months, I don't know, without food. But your body can only go for a few days without water. So when our bodies burn the fat for fuel, the energy part is taken care of. Remember, let's say that you have 10 pounds of fat on your body, and let's say that you consume 2,000 calories a day. Well, 10 pounds of fat is 3,500 calories. So we're talking 35,000 calories, okay? So you have 35,000 calories that you're just carrying around on you. 35,000. And let's say you consume 2,000 a day. Well, 35 divided by 2 is 17 and a half. So if you have 10 pounds of fat on your body, then theoretically speaking, you could go without eating for 17 and a half days. And because of the food that you have in you and the glycogen that you have in you all the time, you could realistically bump that up to probably 18 days. Now, if this was excessive fat, like let's say you actually you're like really, really overweight, you're like, 100 pounds overweight, then burning off those 10 pounds of fat is fine. But if you're if you're like 5% body fat or something, and you literally only have 10 pounds of fat on your body, and you burn that fat off, that could kill you, because you need fat. You need some visceral, maybe not visceral, but you need some body fat for safety reasons. I knew a guy that back when I was a swim teacher and I worked in the pool all the time. I had a coworker who had this weird bodily condition where it was just extremely hard for him to get any kind of body fat. So he was like scrawny all the time, and he struggled to maintain like any kind of weight, which really sucked for him. Like, I empathize. And something he told me was that when you get sick and you have this condition, a flu or a cold can kill you, because your body needs energy all the time. And when you don't have any fat to burn, it starts burning your lean muscle mass and your organs and stuff. And that can kill you. So you have to have some fat on you all the time. But getting back on subject, my point is that just 10 pounds of extra fat lying around, that it's not like you only have 10 pounds of fat, but like if you're really overweight, like if you're 50 pounds overweight, then just 10 pounds of that fat can fuel you for like 2.5 weeks. It's crazy. There's so much energy in fat. So it starts to make a little bit of sense how humanity could live as hunter-gatherers 100,000 years ago, or however long, millions of years ago, however long it's been that people have existed. It starts to make a little sense how our bodies work and how we were able to deal with time, like feast and famine times where we didn't have food available. It's like, oh, legs are for running, arms are for doing arm things, brain is for thinking, mouth is for eating and communicating, nose is for smelling, eyes are for seeing, and fat is for storing up food for when we don't have food. Okay? Okay. So there's lots of ways to get rid of fat. The way that I've been doing for the last 3 months is I've been controlling the amount of calories in, so that the amount of calories out exceeds the amount of calories in. This creates what's known as a deficit. If you run at a deficit, eventually you will run out of whatever it is that you have a deficit. So for example, let's say that you make, $1,000 a month, and you spend $1,500 every month, then you're spending $500 more every month than you're bringing in. Eventually, you will run out of money, and then you won't be able to spend $1,500 a month. You'll only be able to spend $1,000 every month. But so take that analogy and apply it to the body. If you use more calories or energy than you bring into your body, then that deficit has to come from somewhere. And the idea behind controlled calorie counting is that you maintain a safe deficit. So what happens is if your deficit is too big, then your body will start cannibalizing lean muscle mass in addition to fat. What that means is that you'll lose muscle. The dreaded losing muscle. So for the last 3 months, I've been basically never exceeding I have not exceeded a 500 calorie deficit. And when I did exceed a 500 calorie deficit, it was only from exercise, which is usually vastly overestimated. And also, by never dropping lower than a 500 calorie deficit for food, it means that I'm never malnourished. I'm always getting enough vitamins and iron and protein, and you need fat. You need like 40 grams of fat a day for hormone synthesis. So basically, I've been keeping things super safe. Now, let's get to, intentionally starving yourself, fasting. Let's get to that. So what happens when you fast? Well, before I did any research, I just assumed that you would lose all your muscle overnight and it would just be bad, super bad. But after doing a ton of research, I found out that everything I knew was wrong. Well, I didn't know it, I assumed it. Everything I assumed was wrong. And everything that I've been told was basically wrong. After listening to all of these doctors and doing all this research, I found out some really cool stuff. And I'm going to tell you that right now. So, let's address the most important thing, because I'm a man, and I'm in my 30s, so at this age we care about how we look and perform and all that. And so one of the biggest things I was wondering about was what happens to your muscle when you fast, when you starve yourself? Do you just lose all your muscle? Well, the answer is no. The answer is you basically don't lose any muscle at all, and you can actually build muscle while you're literally eating nothing. But it's complicated. Here's why it's complicated. So when you don't eat, insulin levels in your blood drop. And insulin, it does a lot of things. And one of the things that it does is it prevents your body from using the fat as fuel. So when you eat food, you get all this insulin. The insulin says, hey, human body, don't use fat. Use the food that you ate instead. And that makes sense, right? If you ate food, you want to use the food before you use your backup. Fat is your backup system. It's a really, really, really good backup system, but it's, if you can, your body wants to use what you ate before it uses the backup system. It's pretty logical. So when you eat, you get insulin. Okay, so if you don't eat, then your insulin levels drop to, eventually really low levels. And what happens is when your insulin levels drop, then your body starts saying, hey, that fat, it's fair game. It's accessible now. And so when you don't eat for some period of time, let's say 12 hours, I think it's more I think it's 12 hours. When you don't eat for 12 hours, your insulin levels drop low enough that your body will start to use fat for fuel, because by 12 hours, you've pretty much used all of the energy from the food that you ate, and energy has to come from somewhere. And 18 hours in, 24 hours in to a fast, to a period of time where you're not eating, then your body only has fat to burn as fuel. That's the only thing it has. I mean, it has muscle mass too, but it won't. Your body doesn't want to eat. Your body doesn't want to cannibalize your muscle mass if you do certain things. So if you don't exercise at all, then your body will consume some of your muscle mass in addition to fat. If you put physical strain on your body, then I don't know how it works, but it basically tells your body hey, we need the muscle, so don't eat the muscle. So contrary to what people believe, because a lot of people without any sort of research would think, hey, if you don't eat a lot of protein, you shouldn't exercise. Turns out that is totally wrong. If you don't exercise, you lose muscle. And that is it. End of story. End of story. How do you lose muscle? By not exercising. If you exercise and work out and lift weights and run and bike and jog and skate and swim and blah, 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 without eating anything at all, you actually won't lose muscle. And I know that sounds crazy. I'm going to explain myself right now. So, okay, your body is in like starvation mode, which by the way, if you say starvation mode on the forums, you will just get banned. Like people flip out when you say because starvation and starving is already a hot word, but starvation mode, it's like, because when people say starvation mode, it essentially means that they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't done all this research. They don't actually know how the human body works. So here's what happens when you exercise and put stress on your muscles when you haven't eaten for a while. Your body starts pumping out a ton of human growth hormone. That's right. One of those steroids that freaking steroid users use. Except that because it's being pumped out because you don't have any insulin. So what happens is if you do steroids and you inject yourself with some human growth hormone in order to become a swole ass dude, then you run a ton of risks of organ failure or whatever happens when you do steroids, like this particular steroid. And the reason why is because when you have insulin in your bloodstream and lots of human growth hormone, when the two combine, like not literally combine, but when you have like the effects of insulin and the effects of human growth hormone going on simultaneously, it's bad for you. Like I don't want to say catastrophic because I don't actually know the harm, but it's steroids. Like it's really bad. Okay, it's really bad. But when you don't have insulin, then human growth hormone basically has no downsides, and it's great. And so what happens is when you fast and you don't eat for like a really long time, like over 12 hours or more, then your insulin drops and then your body starts making human growth hormone. And if you exercise, it makes a lot more human growth hormone. And the human growth hormone, what it does is it stops, it just like how insulin tells your body not to eat fat and instead to use energy from what you ate, like your food, human growth hormone tells your body, hey, don't eat the muscle for energy because I need it. So the body will eat your fat instead. So when you fast, when you intentionally starve yourself, you don't eat any food, you actually have to exercise and work out. Because if you don't, your human growth hormone levels will be lower and your body will consume for energy more muscle. It'll still consume more fat and muscle, but you'll lose muscle mass. And no one wants that. So contrary to what people who haven't done any research and don't know what they're talking about believe, you actually, when you starve yourself, you actually do want to work out. It's funny because, like I said a minute ago, and I'm reiterating this, it's basically the reverse of what I used to believe, and it's the reverse of what a lot of people believe. But you know, you do a ton of research and you listen to doctors talk about this stuff and you get educated. And by the way, these doctors aren't crackpots. They've done meta-studies. If you don't know what a meta-study is, essentially in any field of science, they take numerous other kinds of studies. Like let's say that I'm in the field of like human physiology. And let's say that I'm like research team from Italy. And I do a study on the effects of eating dairy. And I have like 500 men and women and I analyze them for like 10 years. Then I publish my results. Okay. Now let's say I'm a research team from France and I want to study the effects of eating like pastries and espresso every day. So I do a study on 20,000 French people for like 30 years. And then I publish the results of those studies. Okay, so on and on. Okay, so let's say that we have now like 100 different studies from different countries, different periods of time. Well, what you can do in any field of science is you can take all of these disparate, separate, unrelated, different studies, and you can say, hey, if they have some stuff in common, then I can use all that information from all those different studies as long as that information is controlled and similar in the ways that I need it to be so that I can use it to deduce the hypothesis that I want to test. And so there have been numerous meta-studies now where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people's health information has been analyzed. And like these doctors in particular, but doctors and health science in general, have found that there are a ton of benefits to starving yourself, like fasting. I'm going to keep saying starving yourself, by the way, because to anyone who doesn't know about fasting, that's what they're thinking. But like I said before, when you take a calculated risk and you know all the dangers and you know how to handle everything and mitigate the problems and you know what you're doing, then it's not really starving yourself anymore. It's not really like an eating disorder. It's a controlled, healthy lifestyle choice. So back on topic, yeah, so you don't lose muscle when you fast if you exercise. So losing muscle, bam, that's not a problem. So then, now that we're not worried about losing muscle, what are the other things that you have to worry about when you starve yourself or fast? Well, okay, there's dying, but you're not going to die until you turn into scrawny. So, I mean, as long as you have body fat, you're fine. And I don't mean like literally body fat. I mean like as long as you have extra body fat that you can do without. Because you don't want to be like that scrawny guy I worked with where you have almost no body fat, because that can kill you. If you get a fever, you can just die. So if you have extra, unneeded, unwanted body fat, then okay, so you're not going to starve to death and you're fine. I mean, because obviously you would stop fasting once the fat is gone. I mean, if you kept fasting, eventually you would die. Remember playing with fire? Okay, so if you have excess body fat, then okay, that's fine. You don't need to worry about starving. All right, let's talk about what's the last thing that your body needs. Well, electrolytes. It's got electrolytes. Plants love it. In a nutshell, electrolytes are salt. But in not a nutshell, electrolytes are vitamins and minerals that your body needs to perform certain cellular functions. So for example, the brain up in here, in order to communicate with the rest of your body, you have this thing called the brain stem. It goes down your spine. The brain stem is full of fluid. I think this fluid is called serum. I don't know what it's called. I knew a person back in middle school who had this like health disorder where her brain produced more serum than it needed, and so she had to go into the doctors periodically and have her brain stem drained of extra serum because it was under high pressure because it had too much serum. Like, what a weird disorder. But our human bodies are so complicated. You can have all sorts of malfunctions. So anyway, your brain serum needs salts and vitamins and minerals in order to do whatever it does, which is like pass electrical signals, because that's how your brain and your nerves communicate. When you will your body to action, under the hood, you're sending electrical signals through your nerve paths. Before I flunked out of college, I studied a lot of biology, so this is something we talked about, is how you basically have like little electrical wires going through your body, passing electricity. And that's how cells communicate, and that's how you literally control your body, is electricity. Well, your brain serum, your brain stem, needs vitamins and minerals in order to conduct these electrical processes. And so if you only drink water every day and you think, hey, I've got fat, I got water, that's all I need, you're wrong, buddy. You'll still die eventually if you don't eat. So it's funny. I love talking about this because, you know, you're playing with fire, and if you do things wrong, it will kill you. So it's really cool. So the last thing you need is electrolytes. So, ta-da, electrolytes. Now, this isn't all the electrolytes you need. The big three electrolytes that you need are salt, magnesium, and phosphate. And I can't remember the chemical names, but it's like, you know, salt is NaCl, so sodium chloride. Phosphate is, and magnesium, I can't remember what the chemical, like, atomic atom names are for those chemical compounds or minerals, whatever. But you need salt, and you need magnesium, and you need phosphate, and There's a few other things that you don't need, but they can be nice. I don't know. I haven't. That's one area that I still need to do some more research. But people have done like multi-week fasts, so 20 plus days with just salt and phosphorus and magnesium, and they're fine. So that's the last thing you need is electrolytes, and so that leads me to this little shot glass. So last night I did my first fast ever. Basically, I ate dinner on Friday night, and then I woke up on Saturday, and I thought, because I'd already been doing some research, and one of the things that's really changed my life in the last half a year is this new mentality that I just adopted, where you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to get everything right all the time or every time. That even if you mess up or fail or make a mistake or don't achieve everything that you want, who cares? There's always tomorrow or an hour later, whatever. So do what you can. And this mentality has really changed my life because, for example, when I got injured, hey, I still am not riding bikes. I'm still not running. And I couldn't do any of my exercise until very recently due to my shoulder injury. But I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to do what I can. And so I did what I could. And now I'm back to doing mostly what I wanted. Whereas if I hadn't done anything until I was perfectly better, because I couldn't do everything that I wanted and it wasn't perfect, I probably wouldn't be as physically capable as I am right now. It'd probably take me much longer to recover from my injuries. And this is all because of the mentality that failure is not so bad, and that just because it's like, hey, maybe you can't do everything you want, but you can still do 8 out of 10 things that you want, and that's better than nothing. So on Saturday morning, I thought to myself, hey, I don't know enough about fasting to feel safe doing an extended fast, but I do know enough about fasting from the research that I've done to calculate the risk for a short fast. So I felt safe, still do. I'm glad I did what I did. I'm going to do it again. But I felt confident enough to do a shorter fast. And so again, this goes back to controlling your risks, calculating the risks, and controlling your situation, being trepidatious, and being very careful, right? So I thought, I don't have all the electrolyte stuff down by heart. I don't have all the knowledge about the electrolyte stuff. But I also know that you don't really need to worry about electrolytes very much until you've gone beyond maybe 2 or 3 days of fasting. And so I said, hey, you know what? I'm just not going to eat today. I'll eat dinner tonight, but I'll skip breakfast and lunch, and then at dinner time, I'll eat all of my calories in like a 4-hour window. So this is basically what's known as intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is essentially you have 24 hours in a day. So you take like 4 hours, or 6 or 8. It can be up to 8 hours, and you'll still get some benefits of fasting. So if it's 8, then it's 8 plus 16. Yeah, so you'd have a 16-hour window where you're not eating any food at all, and that's the fasting window. And then you have 8 hours where you are eating. And this is like one of the most loose forms of intermittent fasting. That if someone says they do intermittent fasting, then this might be what they do. So I thought, hey, you know what? I'll just try it out. I'll skip breakfast and lunch, and then at dinner, I'll have a huge dinner, and I'll eat like 1,400 calories, which 1,400 calories is my TDEE minus 500. My TDEE is like 1,800 now. So, I mean, I guess 1,300 calories would be with a 500 calorie deficit. But essentially, I was saying, like, I'm still going to eat all the food that I need today, but I'm going to compress it into a window and try this fasting thing out and see what hunger feels like. So I was going on with my day, and honestly, it was so much easier than I ever thought it would be. Because I've been calorie counting for the last 3 months, I've had to deal with hunger. It'll be like 11 a.m. and I want to eat lunch. But I know that if I eat lunch at 11 a.m., I'm going to want to eat dinner at like 4, and then I'm going to be up until 10, and I'm going to go 6 hours without eating. And that's going to suck. So I know to space my meals out. I know not to eat breakfast too early, and I know to space my meals out. And so, like, I've been dealing with hunger this whole time, even with eating 3 or 4 meals a day and getting more than enough calories every day. I've still been dealing with hunger because I am losing weight. I've lost like 23 pounds. So, when you're healthy, hunger is a normal thing. And this goes back to what the Korean war vet that I knew. This goes back to what he said, that back in the 60s and 70s, like, hunger was a normal thing. You just had to be a little hungry sometimes, and all the time, very often, you're just a little hungry. So I've been dealing with not constant, but like frequent hunger the last month at least. And that's with eating enough food. And so yesterday, when I decided to try not eating at all for 2/3 of the day, I was already well equipped to deal with the hunger. I've got my habits of drinking lots of water and tea and coffee. I've got my sugar-free chewing gum. I didn't use it, but I've got peppermint extract. And I exercise. If you ever wondered, yes, exercise makes you not hungry. When you're walking and running and you're outside and you're exercising, it makes hunger go away. You would think the opposite. If you do high intensity exercise, it will make you hungry. But if you do LISS, LISS, low intensity steady state cardio, I left the C out, but LISS, low intensity steady state. If you do low intensity steady state exercise, it will make hunger go away. And besides things that you can consume, like coffee and tea and peppermint and ginger and apple cider vinegar, besides all that stuff, which makes hunger go away, exercising makes hunger go away, and being busy and preoccupied makes hunger go away. So I'm a programmer, and everyone I work with, like all the programmers I work with, we all have had this, where we're writing some code and we're just so into it that we either forget to eat, or like I've had this happen to me a million times, where I'm hungry but I don't want to get away from my computer because I'm in the midst of solving some tough problem and I'm coding it out, and I don't want to be pulled away from my computer because I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I have to write this code. So I've sat in front of my desk when I'm hungry hundreds of times, and the hunger just goes away, and you just keep coding. And so what'll happen is, and this isn't just coders, this isn't just programmers, tons of people that work full-time jobs will say, hey, you know what, I forgot to eat today. Oops, I forgot to eat. And I mean, they're not like counting calories or fasting like me, so it doesn't matter. Like, they'll just eat and they're fine. It's not like if you eat too few calories in one day that you screw your body up. It's more like you look at all the calories that you eat on a week-by-week basis, and if your weekly totals are lower, then you start to see things happen, like bodily changes. But if you eat like 500 calories one day and 4,000 calories the next day, if that averages out to your TDEE, then you're not going to lose or gain weight. Yeah. So, like I was saying, I was well equipped to deal with hunger. And so I walked 12 miles yesterday, so two walks, each about an hour and a half. And in between those, I showered and I drank lots of tea and water, and I did so many chores. I have some friends that do a lot of drugs, and one of the things they talk about, but I personally do not like doing that stuff because, well, I don't really like medicine in general. I don't like putting things into my body. It freaks me out. I want to be as natural as possible. Like, I won't turn away a Western doctor from doing whatever they want to do, but if there's a way to, if there's like a healthy, viable alternative to medicine, then I would rather exhaust all those options before I use chemical approaches. So, for example, one time I thought I was depressed. This was years and years ago, and I went to the doctor and they said, yeah, we can put you on antidepressants, we can give you a medical marijuana license. And I said, you know what, I don't want to go on antidepressants, and I don't want a medical marijuana license. I really want to see if there's a way I can figure this out without subjecting my body to external factors. And I figured it out. I figured out a way to do it. And I think most problems that we face in life can be solved without these external remedies. But that aside, anecdotally, if you do like a bunch of cocaine or meth or whatever, these drugs that like keep you awake, there's a stereotype where you know, if someone's like house is really 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 pristine, then they might be like a drug user, because certain types of drugs will just basically give you limitless energy, and you're just awake all the time and you have all this energy, and you can't go to sleep, so you're like, what do I do? Well, I guess I'll do chores. And so these people, they just do a ton of chores, and so their houses end up being meticulous. And so you get this funny dichotomy where you have these people that are doing really harmful drugs that are just so bad for you and like screwing up your brain and rotting your teeth out, but their houses are spotless. It's so funny. It's so funny how life is. Well, anyway, so yesterday I was fasting for the first time, and I was dealing with the hunger, but I was like, I need to keep myself busy. Like, I need to keep myself stimulated. You know the phrase, what is it, like, idle's hands do the devil's work? Well, so I needed to keep my hands not idle. So it's not the devil's work; it's house cleaning. But so I did a ton of chores. I did a ton of chores yesterday, in order to keep myself busy. And so now my house is like, my apartment is like the cleanest it's been in weeks, which is really cool. Who doesn't like having a clean apartment? And I also got to catch up on some video games, which, it's funny. I've struggled with video game addiction my entire life, and in the last year, or more like half year, it's just not been a problem. I don't get addicted to video games anymore because I'm too busy prepping meals, learning new recipes for cooking, learning about nutrition, exercising, tracking my calories, keeping up with my friends and family. There's so many things in my life that are so important to me that I just don't have the interest, even the desire, to really play a lot of video games anymore. So anyway, yesterday while I was hungry, I was like, you know what? This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to do all the things that I've been procrastinating on, because now, not only was I not spending time preparing food, eating food, and then cleaning up after myself, which you don't really realize until you decide to not eat for a day how much time that actually is. But not only did I have all that extra time, but I also couldn't afford to let myself sit idle, because if I let myself sit idle for too long, the hunger would become a demon to struggle with. And so in order to keep the hunger at bay, I just got all sorts of stuff done. And so that really feels good. I really feel good about that. Anyway, so dinner came around, and I thought, okay, time to break my fast. It's been 24 hours. You did it. It went great. Now it's time to end it, because, you know, gamblers, the more successful gamblers, they set limits. They say, like, I'm going to pull my money out of the gamble and, you know, cash in my checks or coins or fucking whatever. They set limits, and they do it in a controlled way. And so they often end up much more successful than people that just gamble limitlessly. You know, everyone knows a stereotype where a dude goes to Las Vegas and they win $10,000, and then by the time their vacation's over, they lost it all because they didn't stop when they were ahead. So when I had started the fast, I thought, hey, I'm going to stop after 24 hours and, you know, pat myself on the back. But I thought, hey, you know what? I've gone the whole day, and the hunger has basically been so easy to deal with. And I'm like feeling great. Like, I was feeling really good. And since I was going on a hike today with some friends, I thought, you know, I'm going to go out to this really, really, really nice restaurant that I love. And we're going to get brunch after this hike. And I'm going to eat more calories than I'm supposed to for a day, which is like 1,700 or 1,800. So you know what? If I don't eat dinner tonight, then I won't really have to feel guilty about eating that really nice brunch tomorrow morning. Because remember, weekly calories matter just as much, if not way more, than daily calories. So if I overate today, or yesterday it was tomorrow, I was thinking, you know, if I overeat the next day, then it'll be fine, because I essentially made up for it by not having dinner. Now, obviously, this is a mentality that you have to be careful with. You can't say like, hey, I'll just not eat for a week and then I'll eat like a pig the next week. Like, that's not a winning strategy. But because it was going so well, because I wasn't feeling any negative feelings at all, besides hunger, which I've been dealing with for months, and it's not really that bad. When you get used to hunger, it's really not bad. I mean, it's not pleasant, but it's really not really, it's not bad. Try it. Try it sometime. Try being hungry. It's not so bad. So anyway, I thought, you know what? Let's just not eat dinner tonight, and then I'll eat tomorrow morning. And that is exactly what I did. This morning when I woke up, there's this thing called refeeding syndrome, where if you go for too long without food, then when you go to eat, it can kill you. Refeeding syndrome is exceedingly rare. They've done studies on hundreds and hundreds of emaciated, starving hospital patients, and like in one study, for example, less than 1%, they had hundreds of patients in the study, and less than 1% of them suffered from refeeding syndrome. And because they were in a hospital, every single one of them was fine. The doctors handled it. But even with these hundreds of people, only less than 1 in 100, like less than 1%, actually dealt with this problem called refeeding syndrome. But you can have like a much, much, much less serious form of refeeding syndrome, where you go to eat after you haven't eaten for a while and you feel negative in some kind of way. So even if it's not going to kill you, you still want to be aware of this. This is one of the dangers or like risks that you have to know about in order to do this safely. So it's called refeeding syndrome. Essentially what happens is, with refeeding syndrome, what happens is if you haven't eaten for a long time, then your electrolyte levels are going to be low, and they'll be high enough because you maintain them with a special formula of salts that it's coming in the mail, so I can do this more safely. But your electrolyte levels will be low, and so when your body gets all this food that it hasn't gotten in a while, like could be days, like eventually I'm going to try a 5-day fast because that'll be cool. Your body will use all of its energy and chemicals to process the food, because it's like, oh boy, food, time to use the food. And what happens is your body will use up all the electrolytes for food, and then so what happens is your brainstem suddenly, it doesn't have any electrolytes because they're all being used by your body to eat the food, and that can kill you. You can just drop dead. So I mean, maybe not drop dead. I am getting ahead of myself. You wouldn't just drop dead. You would probably have some symptoms first. But it could kill you. It's called refeeding syndrome, and you have to be aware of it if you want to do a fast that exceeds like maybe 2 days. You really don't need to worry about it until your fasts exceed 5 days. And even then, like I said, in the study where they had a bunch of patients, less than 1% really had this. But better safe than sorry, right? Better safe than sorry. Like if you're going hiking, better to bring the bear mace than not bring the bear mace. Are you going to get attacked by a bear? Probably not. But would you rather be attacked by a bear and have the mace? Yeah. So, so this morning when I woke up, I thought, yeah, you know what? I haven't eaten in 32 hours. So I know I'm going to have this extravagant lunch. And when you don't eat for a while, your body goes into ketosis. Ketosis is just a state of being where your body burns fat for fuel. And so there's certain chemical pathways and biological functions in your body that essentially rev up like a car engine. They'll be off. They won't be used. And then suddenly you're using them a lot. And that's ketosis. Your body goes into ketosis. And all the people that plug the keto diet, they're essentially eating in a way that just puts their body into ketosis, which is the fasting mode that eats your fat all the time. And so when you come out of a fast, your body is coming out of being in ketosis. And when you come out of being in ketosis, you want to basically tiptoe back into eating normally. You don't want to just eat a bunch of carbs right off the bat, because that can cause unpleasantness. Like you might just have a bunch of diarrhea, you might vomit, you might get nauseous. Who knows what would happen? So when you come out of starving or fasting, the first thing that you should eat is something that's high in fat. It's just got lots of fat. And then after you have a meal like that and you've had a few hours, eat normally. If it's like a multi-week fast, then you might take a few days before you can just eat tons of carbs and pancakes and sweets and stuff. But like I'd only been fasting for 32 hours, so like really didn't need to worry about this. Probably wasn't even necessary, but I'm calling all of my bets, or I'm hedging all of my bets or risks or whatever. Like, I absolutely don't want to do anything dangerous because that's the type of personality I have. And so this morning I broke my 32-hour fast with 2 eggs, some egg whites, and some sun-dried tomatoes caked in like some kind of oil. So the meal was like over 50% fat. And oh my goodness, it was so delicious. I had 2 cups of coffee with half a cup of milk in each like mug of coffee. And I forgot how good coffee tastes when you're drinking it hot with a lot of milk. It's the best. And since I hadn't eaten in 32 hours, like every bite that I took tasted so good. Every sip of coffee, I could like feel it going down my throat and warming me up. Like, yeah, with the calorie counting that I've been doing for the last 3 months, I've become much more able to appreciate any kind of food. All food in general tastes better to me now. And I can have one treat and be happy for a month now. So after not eating for 32 hours, something as simple as scrambled eggs with sun-dried tomatoes and a cup of coffee with milk in it tasted so good. And the amazing realization that I've had now is that I can really, really easily fight off hunger. And so I can really easily go the whole day without eating. And then if I want to, I can eat whenever I want because I got all this fat and I got my water and I got my electrolytes. I can essentially not eat for a few weeks in a row if I wanted to right now. I mean, I need to wait for my electrolytes to come in the mail so that I can safely keep my body having electrolytes so that I don't like drop dead from no electrolytes in my brainstem. Stuff like that. Like, you know, go read up on what happens when you run out of electrolytes. It's bad. Once I get all that set up, which it's not hard, you just weigh out potassium, I don't know, you weigh out phosphate, magnesium, and salt, and you put it in some water, and you drink that a few times a day. This is a measured amount that you need to consume every day. You don't want to go too high or too low. There's negative symptoms that you'll experience if you go too low or too high. But if you go on these forums, they have checklists of like, are you feeling this? Are you feeling that? It might mean you're not having enough of this, or you're doing too much of that. And so, like all of this is really well researched, and there's a lot of knowledge. So now that I've experienced a 32-hour fast, which is an entire day sleeping, twice without eating, and I've realized how easy it is to just not eat, it's opened up like a world of opportunity to me. I am so excited. Like, I'm watching a video right now on how to make a 600-calorie chocolate Oreo mint milkshake. Like, I love mint milkshakes. I love mint. And since I've been calorie counting for 3 months, I've had to cut these lavish, calorie-dense, nutritionally low things out of my diet because they don't fit into my calorie counting plans. Like, I essentially need to have like a 400-calorie breakfast, lunch, and dinner, plus maybe like 200 calories of snacks. And that gets me to like 1,500, which is a few hundred below my TDEE, and then I'm losing weight. So I couldn't really afford to have treats the last 3 months. And every time I had a treat, it was like a bit of an ordeal, and I had to figure out how to fit it into my plans and my weight loss goals. Or I had to suck it up and just not lose some weight for a few days. But now that I know that I can do intermittent fasting and restrict my eating time to like a 4-hour window at the end of the day, I will still eat all of the calories that my body needs, but I'll only do it in a 4-hour window. And what this means is that I can eat not whatever I want, because I'm still going to be eating nutritional, I'm still going to be eating meals that are very nutritious, made with food that I cooked myself that's very good for me. No, but basically no processed food. But now that I'm going to be doing that, I can say, hey, if I want to get 1,800 calories in like 2 or 3 hours, I can have a 600-calorie milkshake. That still leaves me with like 1,100 to 1,200 calories to work with to get my protein. And like the milkshake will provide the fat, actually. So the milkshake is contributing to my nutrition as well. I'm watching a video on how to make like a nutritious 600-calorie mint milkshake. A 600-calorie mint milkshake that, it's not as nutritious as eating broccoli and chicken, like, duh. But it's not like eating a milkshake from McDonald's. it's still going to have a lot of protein in it, which means that I can spend that other 1,200 calories to get more vegetables and whatever. So my point is that now that I have fasting as a tool in my tool belt, it means I can cook and eat a wider variety of delicious foods, delicious, nutritious foods, and essentially like get more enjoyment out of my eating. Like there's only benefits here. And as far as like multi-day fasting goes, that is a very specific tool that I am hoping to try out and use eventually. But when I get to my goal weight, which is like whatever weight that I'm gonna weigh when I have a 6-pack, then I won't do that anymore because it won't be necessary. Like it won't be necessary to do like a 5-day fast, for example, which I want to try sometime this month or next month. I want to try it out. I'm going to work up to it. You know, I'm going to do like a 1-day fast, and I'm going to do a 2-day fast, and I'm going to do a 3-day fast, a 4-day fast eventually. And eventually I'm going to get to 5 days and when I feel safe. But it's a tool, and like tools have a purpose, and if you don't need to do whatever that tool is for, then you don't use the tool. So I will be trying out extended, 5+ day fast, not plus, probably just, I'm not at a point where I even feel safe thinking about doing a 5-day. Like I still have some research to do, but I'm not there yet. Take things in stride. But when I don't have weight to lose anymore, then I won't be doing extended fasts. I probably will do intermittent fasting though, because like I've said previously during this video, you can intermittently fast and still consume all of the calories that you need in a day, every day. Another term that people refer to intermittent fasting as is time-restricted eating. So you're still eating all the food that you would normally eat in a day, but you're restricting the time that you eat that food to a short 4 or 8 hour window of time. And why would you do this? Like, why would you eat the same amount of food that you're going to eat in a day, but purposely make yourself hungry for like 2/3 or 4/5 of the day, and only eat like 1 or 2 meals at the end in a short amount of time like that? Like, why would you do that to yourself? Because it probably is more pleasant to eat 6 meals throughout the day. Like every time you get hungry, just eat like that. That's probably more pleasant, right? So why would you do intermittent fasting? Well, the doctors that I was listening to and the research that's been done shows that when you starve yourself or when you fast, your body undergoes temporary physiological changes that are very beneficial in a multitude of ways. So your insulin drops and human growth hormone starts going up a little bit. So when you come out of a fast, you actually can build muscle really quickly. So one of the things I'm going to do a lot of research on, I'm not actually sure if this is true yet, but something I'm planning on researching is alternate day fasting. So you don't eat one day and then you eat normally the other day. And like if you don't have any weight to lose, then you probably have to eat twice as much on the other day to make up for the day that you didn't eat. Which, hey, dude, I would love to eat twice as much food as I'm supposed to in a day. I would totally just not eat for a day so that I could eat twice as much the next day. Like, that's awesome. I mean, I love pigging out. Everyone loves pigging out. I love treats and sweets and eating those big juicy hamburgers with fries. So, but so if coming out of a fast lets you really get an acceleration boost in terms of building muscle, then I'm really going to get excited about alternate day fasting. But so physiological changes the body undergoes when it's in the absence of food are you get less insulin, which less insulin is better in general. Having a really high insulin sensitivity, having your body full of insulin, that's what causes diabetes. Okay, diabetes kills people. So we don't want diabetes. So doing intermittent fasting and having less insulin in your body for most of the day reduces the chance of diabetes. You're going to get increased physical performance from the human growth hormone. People who do fasting say that they experience clarity of mind and they feel more energetic. And after doing a 32-hour fast, I can personally tell you that after doing just one fast, the first fast I've ever done in my whole life, that it is true. At least for me, it's true. Yesterday, I felt amazing. Like, yeah, the hunger was coming and going every hour or like every other hour, but I've been dealing with hunger for 3 months. Like, who cares? Like, hunger is not, it's not a problem. You know, you drink some tea and it goes away. Like, it's really not an issue. So besides that negative, part of it, I was feeling great. Like when I did my second 7-mile walk / hike for the day, normally halfway through that, I'm like getting sore. Oh no, I was feeling great. And when I was doing my chores and such, I was feeling so energetic and productive. I was reading, and normally I would get tired of reading and I would start just consuming YouTube, which takes less brain power to you just watch TV, like how it's called couch potato for a reason. But I didn't really feel like watching that much TV yesterday. I was just enraptured with all this reading and studying and such. And I got so many things done. And so I think that's the clarity of mind and energy that people talk about. So hey, it fights diabetes. It makes you grow muscle faster. It makes you think better and feel better. And finally, this is the holy grail. That's right, there's more. There's more benefits to starving yourself, to fasting. This is the holy grail. This is the holy grail of fasting. It's called autophagy or autophagy. So auto meaning self and phagy meaning consume. So consume self. So cannibalize. You're eating yourself. You're eating yourself alive. Okay, it's not like Dawn of the Dead where you're like taking a bite out of yourself. No, autophagy is something that the doctors were talking about extensively. Autophagy is a process your body goes through where it eats itself, but specifically, when you don't eat, when you fast, your body will start looking for old, worn out cells, like parts of itself, because your body's made of cells, so cells are parts of your body's self. Your body will start looking for tired, worn out, old cells that can be recycled. Like essentially, if you made a triage list of all of the cells in your body and you were like, hey, which cells are the ones that I really don't need, that they can really go away, they're a higher priority than muscle, so your muscle won't get eaten first, assuming you're exercising. Then you have all these like random cells in your body that just, they need to be retired. And so what happens is your body undergoes this process called autophagy, and it consumes these old cells, these old worn out cells, and then it makes new copies or replacements. And so a lot of doctors and a lot of people in this field have actually found that fasting, starving yourself willingly for an unknown duration of time, because you can fast for 12 hours, you can fast for a day, you can fast for a week. This one Scottish guy I mentioned earlier fasted over a year. So you can fast safely in a controlled manner for as long as you want, and the longer you fast, the more you're going to get this process called autophagy. And autophagy doesn't really rev into gear until you've gone like a full 5-day fast. But you do get very small amounts of autophagy with only like a 12-hour fast. So, and if you do intermittent fasting, then you'll have a 16-hour fast, right? If you have a 16-hour window of not eating and 8 hours of eating every day as a lifestyle habit, then you will have 16 hours of fasting. And autophagy starts to kick in after 12 hours. After just 12 hours, you start to get autophagy. Now, it won't be nearly as powerful as the autophagy you would get from 24 hours of fasting, which is why I'm super proud of myself for doing a 32-hour fast. That means I got some good autophagy in there. But I've heard anecdotes from the doctor talking about how people were able to, they would go on like a 10-day fast, and ancient drug use, like a lot of drug users, they'll have scars going up and down their arm from doing heroin. They put the needles in the arm and they inject the drug, right? Heroin, it's a drug, it's bad, ruins your life, okay? So some of these drug users, they don't, luckily, they come out of it and they say, I'm not gonna do heroin anymore. And they're like, how do I get rid of these scars? Like, I don't want people to know that I did heroin, or maybe they do, but whatever, they want to get rid of the scars. And so this doctor was talking about how he had a lot of drug users. He prescribed, like he medically prescribed fasting as a solution to heal scars and other damage. And miraculously, a lot of these drug users' scars went away. And I didn't see the results because I was listening to a podcast, but I can only assume that there was a noticeable improvement. And hey, you know what? I'll take that. I'll take a noticeable. I mean, it's not like I have heroin scars on my arms, but I do have like a scar or two here and there that I would like to go away. And those are just external, superficial things. Your joints will get better. You'll start thinking faster. Maybe probably bullshitting on that one, but there's all sorts of aches and pains that people have. Where if you undergo like a 10-day fast or a 5-day fast, and you really experience like the full blown effects of autophagy, you know, your body eating itself, the worn out bad parts. A lot of doctors say now that fasting has anti-aging effects and even reverse aging effects. And I was just in the YouTube's comment section for some video on fasting, and this one guy said he was 60, but everyone thinks he looks 40. I believe it. I believe it. So autophagy is the holy grail benefit to fasting, and you can get that with intermittent fasting, where you still eat the normal amount of food that a normal person would eat every single day, but you just compress it to a short window of time at the end of the day. So I am super stoked to start working fasting into my lifestyle. I'm going to be doing intermittent fasting. I'm going to be doing multi-day fasting until I lose weight and have a six-pack. Once I lose weight and have a six-pack, I will no longer do any sort of multi-day fasting. I will only do intermittent fasting, because at that point, doing multi-day fasting, I would have to purposely gorge myself on food and build up fat in order to safely undergo a multi-day fast. So like what a lot of people that have been doing fasting for a long time do is they only do a multi-day fast maybe a few times a year, because you have to go out of your way to eat a ton more food than normal to build up some fat so that you can go for 5 or 10 days without eating. So it really is a tool in your tool shed that should only be used in the specific situation where you have excess body fat that you can afford and want to lose. Now, I happen to be in that situation right now. I want to lose another 10 or 15 pounds so that I can see a six-pack abs and feel really great about myself. But once like I said, once I lose that weight, I will no longer be able to safely do a multi-day fast, nor would I have a reason to do it. But I will still have a reason to do intermittent fasting, because the autophagy is really freaking good for you. It'll slow your aging down and make you feel and look younger. So autophagy is great. The clarity of mind is great. The energy is great. Skipping 2 meals and having extra time in my day is great. If I wanted to, I can spend that extra time preparing the big meal at the end of the day. Like, I would much rather have a delicious mint milkshake and all sorts of delicious foods once a day than the way that I've been eating the last 3 months. I don't want to say it's terrible or horrible, because I enjoy it. I'm happy with the food that I'm eating, but I know that I could be eating food that is so much more delicious and tasty if I just had 1 meal a day to spend all of that calorie budget on to make a really delicious meal. Because if I have 1 meal in a day, then I can afford to put calorie-dense creamer on there. I can afford to eat pasta noodles, which are really calorie-dense but not so nutritionally dense. There's all sorts of food options that haven't really been available to me, because I've been trying to spread out the amount of calories that I'm supposed to eat in a day over like 3 or 4 meals. And when you're spreading out 1,800 calories over 4 meals, you only get like 500 or 400 calories per meal. And when you only have 400 or 500 calories per meal, you can't eat certain foods, because like a handful of nuts would be 500 calories. Okay, try eating a handful of nuts and then not eating for 4 or 5 hours. It's not going to work. You're going to feel hungry. And so there's whole forums on the internet dedicated to volume eating, where you essentially create food that takes up a lot of space on your dinner plate, and conversely, a lot of space in your stomach. And so when your stomach is physically full, it sends signals to your brain that say, hey, you're not hungry. So your body decides that it's hungry from numerous factors. And one of those factors is if your stomach feels full. And so basically the way that I've been eating for the last 3 months is I've been creating meals for myself that are not calorie dense. So they still have all the calories I need, like 400 or 500 calories in a meal. Like I'm still eating the amount of food that a normal person would eat in a meal, but they're big meals. Instead of a little hamburger, I'm eating like a big veggie plate, okay? And that just takes up more room in my stomach. That's one of the reasons why I've gone nearly vegetarian lately, is because meat's a lot more calorie dense than broccoli, for example. So I basically haven't been eating any rice, very few grains, because grains are all super calorie dense. Basically no simple carbohydrates, because simple carbohydrates like toast and pasta, super calorie dense. They're not going to keep you feeling full. So I've spent 3 years, not years, I've spent 3 years, oh my goodness, I've spent 3 months essentially learning all these life skills about how to make food that makes you feel full but doesn't make you fat, gives you the right amount of calories and nutrition, and also makes you feel full. I've learned all this information, and now that I have fasting as a tool in my tool belt, now I get to explore all kinds of different kinds of cooking. And I am just so stoked. I am so pumped. And the problem is that I can't just tell people about it, because when I tell people, oh, I'm trying fasting, then their knee-jerk gut reaction, if they don't know anything about the topic, is going to be like, oh, you have an eating disorder, you're going to harm yourself, you're going to die, you're starving yourself to death, you're crazy, you need help. Like, I was telling people that a month ago. So I know if I was doing it, everyone else is going to do it. So I really can't tell people very much about it. But when you get the full story and you get all the science and you get all the knowledge and basically everything that I've said in this video, then you realize, hey, he knows what he's doing. And hey, it actually isn't crazy. Hey, it can kill you. It is playing with fire. There is the chance that you can screw up and cause permanent damage. You can kill yourself if you don't know what you're doing and you fast. But you can kill yourself driving a car, okay? So it's all about learning how this stuff works, learning how the human body works, learning all the risks involved, learning how to mitigate and get rid of those risks, learning how to be careful and safe, knowing when to stop, etc. And so last night I had a little trouble sleeping, and I felt a little weird, and I knew the fasting was kicking in, the autophagy was kicking in, the ketosis was kicking in. It's the first time in my life I experienced ketosis, so I knew that was the factor. And I also knew that I hadn't been consuming electrolytes. I took 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon in a glass shot, a bunch of water. If you just take straight salt, it can burn a hole in your stomach. So see, I know these things because I do all this research, because I'm careful. So you drink a lot of water, and I put it in the shot glass, but I had a big cup of water too. So I took the shot, a cup of water, cup of tea. Then an hour go by, I took another, and I had 2 teaspoons. I had 2 teaspoons of salt last night, but it's not enough. There's no phosphorus. No, is it phosphate? I can't remember. I got to look it up. I have notes on all this, but I think it's phosphate. Or it's phosphorus. Whatever, it's phosphorus. One of those pH, silent F. So that's coming in the mail. Once I have the phosphorus and the magnesium in addition to the salt, then I think that might have been the reason why I had a little trouble sleeping last night, is because I only took some salt at the end of the day, but I was drinking so much water yesterday, I probably ran my body out of electrolytes like 3/4 through the day. So I think what happened was last night I probably was having like an electrolyte problem, and that's why I had a little trouble sleeping last night. And so if I hadn't just taken 2 teaspoons of salt right before I went to bed, if I had instead spread that out throughout the day, which is what you're supposed to do, and I will be doing once the stuff comes in the mail, then I think that might have stopped the problem, the trouble sleeping from happening. So yep, so made this video. I'll probably send it to people in my life that I care about, so that they can know what I know. And this way, it's on a video, so you don't have to listen to me talk your ears off in person. You can like pause the video or turn it off if you don't want to hear it, because it's literally video. If I was hanging out with you, you wouldn't be like, hey Joe, can you stop talking? I mean, maybe you would, but it's so easy with a video. You can just be like, you know what, I don't want to hear this right now, or I want to finish this later, or I want to listen to it when I'm on the toilet, whatever. So I've essentially, in this video, I've distilled all of like the information that I've learned in the last few days, and I've also given you a lot of anecdotes about how my life's been going, which is on a very, very, very upwards trend. I mean, I'm doing better. Not that it's related, but I'm doing better at work too. Like most facets of my life are doing better now today than they were doing months ago. Like just a lot of things in my life are doing better, and the health and fitness part is the biggest one. Maybe not in terms of importance to my life, but in terms of improvement, yeah, the biggest improvement. But I've had a lot of different facets of my life have been improving lately, and so like I know that most of what I'm doing is correct, and I'm doing like the right thing. So take everything I said with a grain of salt. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I don't have any degrees. I'm not certified in anything. Blah 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 blah. Everything that I've told you so far, I just gleaned this information from all of the places on the internet that I already told you before. I don't actually know anybody who's into fasting. This is something I pride myself in, is I find these random things that interest me and I just get into it. And a lot of people that I know, when they are into something, it's because they have a friend who got them into it. But for me personally, no one got me into this stuff. I don't have anyone who told me about this stuff. I completely did this on my own. I did all the research on my own. That means I'm fallible. It means I'm always fallible, but it means I'm more fallible than someone else because I can have huge blind spots in my knowledge. But I'm aware of this. And so I mitigate that too. It's all about mitigating risks. So I'm proud of myself for learning all this information and then actually taking the action and trying it myself and then seeing it work, like, and knowing that I don't have anyone to thank except myself. I did it all myself. I took the initiative to explore all these different subjects. I took the time to research and learn all this information. And then I took the calculated risks to try it out. And it's taken me 3 months to get to the point where I feel safe trying something like not eating for a day. But I'm at a point now where I feel safe doing more than that. And I'm not gonna do it until the electrolyte stuff comes in the mail, the magnesium and the phosphorus or phosphate, again, whichever one it is. And I also ordered a jewelry scale so that I could measure exactly how many milligrams of each one I need per serving per day. Like I'm on top of this. But it feels so good to say that all of these successes came from myself and I don't have anyone to thank except for me. But that's not true. That's not true. Because I couldn't have done this without all the people on the internet, all the doctors on the podcasts, all the people on YouTube making these videos, and the people in my life who said, moderation, moderation, be careful. I couldn't have done it without all of you. So I say I did it all myself, and largely I did, but at the same time, there's no way I could have done any of this without all the people that came before me and the people in my life that listen to me talk about things and let me vent and ask questions and such. So, but you could say that about just about anything in life. So, hey, that's a wrap. Thanks for the video. Or really, I just wanted to say all this stuff and get it off my chest. Not in terms of guilt, but just I can't really take anyone and sit them down and tell them about all this stuff without them getting bored out of their gourd. But I can talk at a video camera as long as I want, and the video camera ain't gonna say shut up. Maybe you'll hit pause or turn the video off, but that's after the fact. I hope you learned something. If you made it to the end, well, I don't know what to say, but I appreciate you watching.